Hello guys, it's the Caribbean Bookworm, and today I'll be giving you a book review for Educated by Tara Westover. Educated is an autobiography written by the author Tara Westover, an historian, and she basically tells the story of her life regarding growing up in a family that is a very extremist like religion group. She was raised in a family of Mormons, and her father in particular believed that the end of days were near. So he was basically grooming them to live in a lifestyle of which they're away from society because society has lost their ways, and they're just living in isolation, just them, his father, his mother, and his various siblings working on protecting themselves and forming a life, in essence, basically, in order to survive the end of days, the apocalypse, you could say. Some of the siblings, including Tara Westover, discovers education and the world outside of their own little bubble, and basically she becomes more and more curious and starts to learn that there are different views of life, and it is a story of which a lot of people experience during their day-to-day life that we just don't hear about. And it is incredible that this author came forward with her story and basically shined some light on what it is like actually growing up in such a situation, and actually the challenges of trying to overcome those type of traditionalist like type of home scenario. Something I found also really interesting is basically that during the book, as you see Tara progressing through life with her education, going places, going to big universities and such, finishing her doctorate, etc. You see how some of her siblings, especially one of her sisters, actually reflect what would have happened if Tara actually stayed in the setting that she grew up in, and the consequences that would have had, good or bad. But without further ado, let's go into the pros and cons of the book. The first pro I have for this book is a definite big one, and that is the first person perspective or narrative from the book. This first person narrative basically makes you see everything through the eyes of Tara, and it essentially heightens up and amplifies every little thing she experiences. You feel every little bit of conflict, you feel every little bit of drama, of emotion, and you feel every little bit of euphoria she gets as well when she achieve certain things in life. So this first person narrative made for a much bigger emotional impact than if she perhaps had written it in a more 3D type of narrative. Pro number two I have with the book is something of which I mentioned when I started introducing the book, and that is basically the believability in the writing that she puts into this book, and essentially feeling what it's like to grow up in like an extremist like religious family. I found this to be particularly interesting, as you can see that things that are problems in day-to-day life, for example, the family experiences a lot of incidents and a lot of accidents. A lot of times when you have healthcare and such, your first number one option will be to, oh, let's call 911, or let's call the ambulance for them to handle the situation. But in Tara's world, that is not the normal thing to do. In Tara's world, the normal thing to do is to bring the injured person back home, and the mother or certain someone will tend to do their wounds, basically do by basically using home remedies, herbology. And for a lot of people, practicing such forms of healing and wound caring is quite risky at first glance, but for others and a lot of other people today in our day-to-day world as well, this is quite normal. So the simple fact that she wrote this in such a wonderful narrative makes you actually buy into the story, and again, it deals with that first person narrative. What makes something like this so impactful is basically getting the full story of someone. And this is the case with Tara Westover too. Because we got to hear her full story through this book, we can sympathize more with her. We root for her more. And when people see her today on social media, they're like, yes, Tara. And this is so awesome. And it's quite, I think a lot of people who want to write memoirs or autobiographies ought to read a book like this, because basically you get a lot of good sense of what an autobiography is supposed to be like, basically, because a lot of people have stories to tell, a lot of people have wonderful stories to tell, but just they don't know how to express and share their story in a way that will have such a big influence on the world. And pro number three, the last pro I have with the book, is basically the way the book is divided into different phases of her life. The beginning of the book starts from her childhood up to her early teenage years, so around the age of 13, I think, yes, 13 to 15. The second phase of the book is her going to college, moving away from home, and the problems that brings about. That is it basically for the pros I have with the book. The only con I have with the book is not really a con, it's just something which presented a reading difficulty for me. So whenever I say con, it's like it's not a flaw with the book, it's more maybe something of which I stumbled with when reading the book. And in this case, with Educated, that was that there were a lot of characters, a lot of siblings, especially, and family members throughout the book. So at times it was hard to keep track. So that presented a bit of a difficulty, especially when reading more and progressing through the book. As you get to the point where she's older and when she's finishing her university degrees, and when she starts to interact again with some of her previous family members, and it was like, oh, who was that, who went through that, oh look, that's the person that, okay, yeah. So that presented quite a bit of a reading difficulty for me, but that aside, this book is actually really, really good, and I could not think of any other con I have with the book. If you ever feel like you want to, perhaps in the future, write an autobiography book or read a book about someone who basically goes from a really traditionalist family towards learning about herself, growing out of that, and basically gaining more education, I think this book would be a wonderful read, and especially a read for students. I think students will really appreciate this, as the book's main value is basically how education serves a really important, like crucial role. And in a world which is dictated by stories about people who dropped out and became entrepreneurs and such, I think people sometimes tend to lose the value of how meaningful education really, really is. In essence, I would highly recommend this book. And I saw some people like Barack Obama read the book too, so that tells you something as well about the book. But yes, I hope you guys enjoyed the review and stay tuned for more. Bye.